on YouTube Live. Got a lot to talk to you this morning about, and so let's open our time with a word of prayer. Father, thank you today for this wonderful opportunity to be able to share with one another some little tidbits, some information, and also some advice. Bless it, we pray, in Jesus' name. Amen. Well, I find it absolutely fascinating to be able to talk to young people, especially what we would consider tweens, those kids that are between the ages of, let's say, 8 and about 12. There is an absolute assurance and certainty in their lives. I actually have an 8 and 9 year old granddaughters. I have an 11-year-old grandson. And I've had lots of discussion about the future and what they plan for their lives. And the one thing that I have discovered is that they are pretty sure about what they're going to do. And they also have some pretty definite morality and ideas on what is right and what is wrong. It's during that time period that most people, of course, develop what they would actually like to do with their vocation and, of course, what they would like to do with their lives. When I was, for example, 11 or 12 years old, I remember particularly when I was 12 years old, I went down to Ontario, and my uncle, whose name was Ernest, or Uncle Ernie, as we would call him, he said to me, "What is it that you want to do with your life?" And I said, "Well, I want to be a writer. I want to be able to put down on the page my thoughts." And he said, "Well, that is a wonderful thing to actually, want to be able to share stories, to be able to, bring information to the world. That is a wonderful way to do it." Now, writing is like an artist, or like those that are in theater, or those who want to express themselves. It's taking an imperfect situation, an imperfect, project, and making some sort of perfection out of it. It was very interesting that there was an artist in a major city in United States that they had, commissioned him to make a wonderful artist, a wonderful mural on the side of a building. So what did he do? He made a beautiful ocean scene with two whales. Recently, of course, the the city fathers said, we have a different vision of what the city is all about. And so what did they do? They repainted over his mural and made a blue background, and then made an advertisement. Now, one of the things that that particular artist had asked when he made the mural, he says, "I am asking you to give me guarantee that you're never going to change that particular mural." That mural had become world famous. But they didn't stay to the agreement. And so he sued the city and recently went to court and won the battle. Now, the artists, of course, made this scene because the city said, "We have a certain vision of where we would like to go as a city." But the new council said, "We don't want that vision anymore." And he had it written into his contract that they couldn't change the mural, because the simple fact was that they had asked him to do this, and he was very happy to do it, and it had become world famous. People from all over the world came, and they basically took pictures, and it had become a almost a UNESCO site. It hadn't, but it had a mention by the United Nations. And so basically, they he was able to go to court, and he got compensation because of the situation. Well, as an artist, of course, he, saw an imperfect building and turned it into a perfect mural, and also as well became world famous. Now, That was his dream. When they asked him when he was 12 or 13 years old, hey, what would you like to do? He said, I would like to become an artist. And he became an artist. Well, when you talk to somebody who's in that age bracket of 8 to 12, they pretty well know what they want to do with life. But often what happens is there is situations that begin to develop when you are a little bit older, when you are, let's say, a teenager. All of a sudden, your sense of direction becomes a little convoluted. And the reason why it becomes convoluted is because outside pressures begin to, of course, change your situation. Your friends will come along and say, well, that's not much of a dream. You should do this or you should do that. Or you get to a working age and all of a sudden you start down a different career path. And before you know it, you look at yourself and you say, what happened? There's a lot of people who are doing jobs and doing things that are not, them. They have certain skill sets, they have certain talents, certain ideas, and somehow it got off path. You know what the greatest comfort in life is not knowing, or is not what you own. It's knowing that you've not lost yourself while trying to get through life. That is a real comfort. Yesterday, I had the privilege of going to a show and shine just a block away from my home. The local Legion was putting on a show and shine, classic cars, classic motorcycles. I happen to have a 1965 classic truck. So I took my truck over and I have a classic motorcycle, 1998 Intruder motorcycle. So I took them over and I showed them. And it was fun to be able to talk to different people. I was talking to one particular guy who had an Eldorado Cadillac, and he had just last year spent $15,000 to have it repainted. He was very, very proud about it. It was in 1967, the first year of the Eldorado. And I looked at it and it was a beautiful car. And he had spent a lot of time and money on this particular car. Beside me was a roadster. There was a gal who was older and he had spent a lot of time and a lot of money on his roadster. And these things were, you could tell that these were their idols. These were the things that they spent most of their time and money on. And that's fine. But, you can't take it with you. Sooner or later, somebody else is going to own it. Somebody else is going to, be able to, you know, do something with it. In fact, not that long ago, in a rural property in the province of Alberta, they opened up a barn and they found about 20 classic cars. You see, what had happened was the farmer who had vested so much of his time and money in these classic cars passed away. And his wife wasn't aware of what was going on in the barn. She knew that he liked cars, but she didn't know to the extent that, of course, he had been involved in these classic cars. Well, she passed away, and the family went into this barn and found all these old classic cars. And so they had them appraised, and it was found that the family had literally millions of dollars. And so they had an auction up, and people came from everywhere. That farmer, even as much as he loved his classic cars, he couldn't take them with you. And so, it's not what you own, it's knowing that you haven't lost yourself while going through life. Often what happens, and I've had many discussions with older people, and I asked them, what did you want to be when you were young? And they would tell me. I said, what happened? Why did you follow this particular path? And how did you become this person when you were this person when you were young? And every single time they just said, well, life happened. Something happened when I was 16 or 17 that made me go a different direction. And I said, were you happy with your career path? And about 2 out of 10 of the people that I talked to said, yeah, I am happy with my career path. Others said no, but life happens. And so that's often what they say, life happens. Well, the simple thing is, if you don't allow life to shape you, but you shape your life. Let me give you a little example. When I was, I told you about the fact that I was at about 11 or 12 years old, I wanted to be a writer. When I was 13, which was the next year, I got a brochure from the Columbia School of Broadcasting. And that right then and there, I wanted to be a broadcaster. That was my life ambition. Well, guess what? I went to school, I became a broadcaster. Now, also, as well, I followed a second career path, which was, of course, to be a pastor and also, as well, a communicator. Well, the interesting thing was, in the last 13 years before I retired from broadcasting, I was, of course, on a major market radio station. I was the morning man. That meant that, of course, I would broadcast during the peak hours of 6 to 8, which was, of course, the morning drive. And I had a listening audience of almost 400,000 people. You see, the station that I was on had a 50-watt transmitter. That means that we could be heard around the world, but also as well in a large section of Canada and United States. And so you could hear me in the provinces of Saskatchewan, the province of Alberta, the province of British Columbia. You could hear me in the Northwest Territories, and you could hear me in Washington, Montana, and also parts of, Idaho. It was a marvelous situation. And I was able for 13 and a half years to be on a major market radio station broadcasting. That was my dream, and I got to be able to do it. And it was really, there were many, many times where I was on small market radio stations, in small towns where I was a clergyman. But I stayed true to my broadcast roots, and I was able to do that. And the thing that you have to do is, when life comes to you and you're able to walk and navigate through the difficulties of life, you've stayed honest, you've stayed kind, and you didn't let the world make you hard. That is decisions and choices that you make. You have to make the choice and decision that you're going to, if necessary, stand alone. When I was a teenager, I had a small group of friends. And the reason why I liked these friends is because they accepted me the way that I was. And of course, I accepted the way that they were. My close friends all had different likes and different ambitions in life. I had this one friend whose name was Roger. Roger was a young man who was incredibly gifted in the area of computers. He was actually writing computer programs, when he was a teenager. He became an IT specialist and basically made his living with computers. I had another friend whose name was George, and George was incredibly good at sales and became a very good salesman. Later on in life, he decided to try a different career path, and he became a social worker. He had a very wonderful gift of being able to, bring out the best in people. And it was wonderful to see these two friends of mine be able to do that. And I had other friends who, of course, were, gifted in other areas, and they followed those particular career paths. Why? Because we had learned to accept each other the way that we were. We were kind of a funny group of young men, and that we would just simply, hey, this is the way we are, let's enjoy it. And we didn't fall into the trap that so many people fall into by allowing someone else to shape the way that you think, or go. And I was very blessed. I admit that very much, that I was blessed, that I was able to see that when I was young. Because there were many people who said, you should do this, or you should head this direction, or, this is the how you should be. Because often what people will try to do is shape you in the image that they want to see. And if you are, of course, a weak person, or a person who is looking for approval and looking for, basically some sort of understanding, um, then you will conform to their image of who they think you should be, and not the image of you. And it's a very, very tough situation. I really am grateful for the strength that I decided when I was young that I was going to path. But not everybody is that way. Not everybody is, of course, self-assured. And so it can happen where life can take you a totally different direction. And I want to tell you something: trials and tribulations, problems, and all these different things that you face can take you and make you into the person that you don't want to be. Let's say, for example, someone hurts you. Okay. It could be an authority figure. It's usually an authority figure, someone who is over you. It could be a parent, it could be an employer, it could be, a teacher. And basically, they can ruin you. They can really ruin. They are, whatever's going on in their situation. They could be selfish, they could be narcissistic, they could be, a dozen different things. And they hurt you. And all of a sudden, you start withdrawing into yourself. This is what happens to so many people. You get offended. You begin to get hurt. I want to tell you something. It's okay to get hurt. It's not okay to stay hurt, because the thing that happens to you is this: the person says something, the person does something, and the first thing that you do is you start thinking about it. It becomes a strong thought. And then if you continue to dwell on it, you begin to rehearse what you should have said. You rehearse what you should have done. And regret is always 2020. Do you remember that story or that show called You've Got Mail? Well, Tom Hanks was talking to, of course, Meg Ryan, and he was advising her that, there was this horrible person in her life. It was actually him, because they were talking online and they were not aware of each other's identity. Well, he says, when someone who's hurting you, you're going to, in that moment, if you're prepared, you're going to zing them. But he says the problem with giving a zing is the fact that afterwards you're going to regret what you had to say. Well, when you are basically hurt or offended, when someone does something or says something to you, the first thing you think about afterwards is what you should have done. You rehearse it. And when you rehearse it and you begin to think about it through, and you can magnify the hurt. You can magnify the situation. It may have been very devastating. It may have been just a small thing, but you begin to make it bigger. You make a mountain out of a molehill. You begin to rehearse it, and then before you know it, you're nursing it. And when you nurse it, what you're basically doing is you're making it bigger. You say, woe is me. And before you know it, you have created a mountain, and you have turned it into a curse. What I'm talking about, when you turn into a curse, you put a wall between yourself and that person. And usually the biggest hurts are when you are people that are closest to you, people that you trusted, people that you cared about, and these people hurt you. And before you know it, you put up a wall. And when you put up a wall, instantaneously, what you've done is you've allowed that thing to control your life. Over the years, I've come across people who have said, my mom, my dad hurt me. Let me tell you a little story. When I was pastoring in Yellowknife, there was a young man that came to me, and he was broken and he was hurt. And I said, okay, who was the one that hurt you? He says, my dad. My dad always belittled me. I could never, ever meet his expectations. Well, I said, have you talked to your dad? He says, my dad is gone. I said, oh, that's not good. And I said, what I want you to do is I want you to write a letter to your dad. He says, write a letter to my dad. I said, yeah, this is therapy. I want to take you through a little therapy today. You see, one of my sidebars, one of the things that I used to do was I was a family counselor. Okay. And because I was a family counselor, one of the things that I would use is, especially if you weren't able to communicate with that individual because of various reasons, I said, write them a letter. He said, write my dad a letter. He's dead. I said, you're doing it for your benefit, not for him. He's not going to care one way or another. So he wrote a letter about all the things that he had done, his dad had done. And I said, at the last part of the letter, forgive him. I said, let it go. So he wrote down, Dad, I forgive you. And you know what happened? Instantaneously, as soon as he wrote it, he began to sob. He began to cry. What was he doing? He was forgiving his dad. He was releasing it. He was letting it go. You see, this inner turmoil had been, in his life. This unforgiveness had bound him and made him a prisoner to certain negative emotions. And as soon as he said, Dad, I forgive you, the flood came. And I saw him literally sobbing. And then all of a sudden, he looked up and he had a smile on his face. He says, I feel so much better. I said, that's right. The reason why is because you've forgiven. You're not in prison anymore. You have walked through the healing process. And it was beautiful to watch this young man's whole disposition change. All of a sudden, his features softened. All of a sudden, the anxiety, the stress, the fear, all of that was gone. Why? Because he forgave. And you see, that's one of the keys of not allowing life to destroy you or to shape you. You and I have and will get hurt, maybe even on a daily basis, depending on who we're involved in. But when you can stay honest and when you can stay kind and you've not allowed the world to make you harm, I want to tell you something. That kind of peace is worth more than anything. To be able to know that you can look back at your younger self and say to yourself, you know what? I didn't allow the world to make me hard. I didn't allow other people to conform me to their images and to their standards. No, I stayed true to who I was and what I wanted to do with life. A lot of people don't do that or allow other people to basically shape them. This can really happen in romantic and long-term relationships. How many young ladies and young men will, basically compromise their ideals? They'll allow another person who they say they love, and that person will exploit that, and that person will manipulate that. And before you know it, you have enablers. There are one of the biggest things that happen, especially to those who are in abusive relationship. They justify the other behavior of that individual, even if that individual is destructive. There are many ladies, for example, who get involved with abusive husbands. And one of the questions that you ask is, why don't you leave? Why don't you get out of the situation? And instantaneously, they start justifying it. They begin to, enable that particular, oh, I did something wrong. He got angry because of this situation. The reality of the situation is that they have been shaped and molded by that abusive behavior, and they have turned into a person that they never thought they would become. And that can often happen when you have an overpowering personality. And when that happens, it's amazing what can happen to an even a strong-willed individual because of emotional insecurity. They will allow another individual to overpower their personality and turn them into somebody that they never thought they would happen. That often happens to people. That's why you and I have to make certain choices every day. We make a choice that we're going to be kind. We're going to make a choice to be honest. And I want to tell you something. There's a lot of, we just came through, for example, the income tax season. And it's a real temptation to, lie to the IRS or to Revenue Canada or the taxation particular organization that is in your country. And it's easy to do that. It's easy also to lie, to be dishonest, when faced with a difficult situation. Many, many times people will lie to someone just to be able to make and smooth things over. When you can stay honest, when you can stay kind, when you decided that you're not going to allow the world to make you hard, you can very easily become hard. You can become very cynical. I mean, we see this so often, especially in politics. I mean, when you look at what's going on in the United States, it can very easily make you cynical and mock and say to yourself, well, even the kind people, when they get into government, turn into corrupt. One person put it this way. He says, how do you know that a politician is lying? His lips are moving. And so it's easy to become cynical. It's easy to become hard. But if you choose not to, that is peace. That is worth more than anything. When I originally started this conversation, I reminded, like I said, I've had many conversations with 8, 9, 10, 11-year-olds. I have 3 of them as my grandchildren. And I've asked them, what do you want to do with life? And they tell me. And then I give them this piece of advice. I say, Mira, Sarah, Judah, make sure that you don't allow anyone to change you and make you into somebody that you weren't designed to be. And Mira told me the other day, don't worry, Papa, I won't. And I said, I sure hope not. And, I was very honest with her. I said, Mira, there will be people out there who will try to make you do things and will try to steer you the different direction. Don't allow that to happen. And this is why this conversation is kind of, fresh and new with me. I had the same conversation not that long ago with my granddaughter, Sarah. And I had the same conversation last summer with, of course, my grandson, Judah, who's now 11 years old. And they were very particular on what they saw and how they saw life, and also as well what they wanted to do with their lives. And I fully applaud them and I fully back what they want to do with their lives. But it's very easy to get distracted. It's very easy to allow somebody who has a more powerful personality to be able to take you off path. Don't allow that to happen. And surround yourself with people who will, of course, accept you for who you are. That's the beautiful thing about true friendship. They know all about your imperfections. They know all about your views and your ideas, and they accept you for who you are. That is absolutely wonderful. And they stay your friends and they walk through these things with you because they understand, they love you, and that's true friendship. Well, that's my thoughts for you and myself today. So if you're young, stay true to your younger self. And if you find yourself off path, get back on track. Remember, and it's a daily choice. It's the choices that you make every day. The small choices, for example, to be kind when nobody's watching, choosing to be honest when everybody else seems to be liars and dishonest. You can go to bed at night knowing that you made the right decisions throughout the day. Father, help us today to be able to be compassionate and kind and loving and honest and wise, not to allow the people of this world and the environment of this world to shape us into somebody that we never thought we would be. Help us to stay true to ourselves and be true to the individual that we were when we were 8, 9, 10, 11, or 12 years old. Because it's amazing how much clarity they have in life and how they see things black and white. My granddaughter is absolutely black and white. My other granddaughter is black and white. My grandson is black and white. They know what they want, and let's help. I pray that they won't fall into the trap of allowing the world and also other people to shape them into someone that they're not. That's why I pray for them every day. And that's why I'm praying for you. My name is Robert Dean Steele. I want to thank you so much for joining me today. Now, I want to tell you something. If you like what you're seeing and hearing, I always encourage you to press the like button and subscribe to my YouTube channel. I want to thank all the people that do subscribe to my YouTube channel. Thank you very much. Also, as well, check out my daily shorts. Every day, I do a series of short little messages, all under about a minute, and just giving one particular thought. And they can be so helpful, and also they are designed to illuminate, elucidate, and to encourage. All right. You have yourself a great and godly day. My name is Robert Dean Steele.